Hello again, everyone. You're joining us for another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. My name is Jeff Mix. I'm head of content and research. My guest today is Cynthia Lapoint of Kerry. We're going to be having a conversation about work-life balance for working manufacturing executives, and with a little bit of emphasis, I think, on women in leadership roles. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I wonder if we could start off by maybe giving a picture of where things are in the manufacturing space right now in terms of work-life balance. I think a lot of companies came through COVID and said, we can work remotely, we can work hybrid, but people still have to be in factories doing the job on the shop floor. That has to be an interesting dynamic now. Can we talk about that?
Definitely. And I appreciate you bringing the fact that, in manufacturing, all we do is manufacture. At the end of the day, if we don't manufacture, we don't have people to do it, there's no reason for us to be here, right? So having shop floor folks showing up every day, you need to make sure you're there to support them as well. Understanding as well that, and let's be honest, newest generation, along with COVID in the last few years, always sometimes mean that people want to get a better work-life balance and being able to work remote a few days a week. So we really had to sit down with people at the site, and I'm just talking about my site, obviously. I'm not talking for everybody here, but figuring out how can we leverage that new remote work technique and making sure that we are there to support the daily operations. We've tried several things, as I'm sure other companies have as well. We've taken turns. We've allowed people to take a couple of days working remote, only like almost establishing quota to make sure that there's people to cover on a 7-day operations, 24 hours. And then we ended up, after the last couple of years, just finding out that whatever admin people feel like they should be doing, because they, as much as they are engaged and mobilized, the work is going to get done. We just need to make sure that they're going to show up at the site. They're going to be on the floor at least once a week. So for some, it actually meant coming to work every day. For them, it was a no-brainer. We're in a manufacturing facility. Everybody's there on their shift. So I'm going to have to be part of this team and be at the site. For others, it's like, I work better from home. I just don't have the distraction and the fast-paced environment that actually happens at the plant. And I'll be working from home, but I'll make sure I'll come to specific meetings or at least once a week. So it's been very much of a learning over the last couple of years, trialing with successes and not so much of a success as well. Coming up with the guidelines wasn't working for us. So coming up with tours, calendars, specifics didn't work well. So we actually just pretty much went with the flow, and just the only thing we ask folks is to be there at least once a week.
I think that speaks to a flexibility, an open-mindedness, and also the idea that you are treating each of your employees as an individual. It's not going to be one size fits all. Let's have a conversation about what is actually going to make sense for you and the role you're doing and the work that needs doing. So I think that's actually an approach to be applauded. It doesn't have to make perfect sense and fit within a structure. We're going to figure it out as we go.
I agree. But, nowadays, you just when you're managing, you really like to have structure and processes and SOPs in place. So coming up with the idea that, to your point, it's no one size fits all. It's a little difficult to digest and put on a day-to-day, but it's just working out super well, and people are very engaged by doing so. So
it's terrific. I wonder if we could speak a little bit about how you're maintaining your culture in that circumstance, because there are people who are there all the time. There are people who are coming in once a week. There's all kinds of different, variations between the two extremes. Are they still feeling like one team working together, or is there an on-site culture and a remote culture, and they sort of build bridges between each other? What has your experience been there?
That is a very good question. I want to say that what we did differently over the last couple of years by putting this very open work schedule for everybody, was to have more social events to make sure that people connect. So we've added, it doesn't have to be like an annual golf tournament that's going to take the whole plan down for 24 hours, but just little things where people can still connect together. Like we had like playing cards on a Tuesday afternoon, or going for a beer on a Thursday night, or even a coffee, lunch and learn on Wednesday around lunchtime. So just having those specific activities where people can come, connect. I mean, we're all colleagues. So for sure, when we sit down together, we're going to end up talking about work at some point. So it definitely drove that unity for the culture question. As far as, are we all aligned on the mission, on the values of the company? Obviously, we have all our management structure, so the daily management, so every single functions, whether you are remote or you are at the site, all at their daily hurdle. They're going to have all their KPIs to cascade down. So I think that portion is covered with our daily management system. But again, the heart of the culture and being sure you engage and mobilize your folks is by creating those touch points. And that's how you align internally. So I think it worked well, but we needed to put this little touch point and not force it on people, but extend or expand the offer.
I'd like to get back to the idea of work-life balance. I think, in this new working paradigm, some people are remote, some people are on site, some people are in a hybrid role. There is still going to be a place for the overachiever, the person who wants to come to the recognition of their bosses. What does overachieving look like in this new dynamic?
Well, if you think about it, right, I mean, prior to this new ways of working and that old remote work environment, and I guess I'm going to talk to myself because I consider myself being an overachiever.
Absolutely.
I would show up very early in the morning, leave late at night. We'll make sure I show up on weekend crews, It was all about being there and showing up. Where nowadays is, if you do work remote 3 to 4 days a week, how do you still plan on being that overachiever? Or how do you satisfy that need? Because that's how I'm going to frame it. I don't think you plan on being it more than that's something like a desire you have to achieve what you put yourself out to. So we've seen quite a bit of folks being like pretty much reachable any time of the day, any hour of the night, almost, and on weekends. So we had to re-emphase how that work-life balance is so important, because that's not true, even if you think that might be, that 24 hours a day, you're going to have the same level of energy. You're going to be as strategic in your answer. You're going to be as attentive to details. That's just not happening. So we had to put a bit of a new structure in place, and we implemented it with communication at first, and then we had to put a stop on emails traffic. So usually we try to cut traffic around like no later than 7 or 8 p.m. at night, and we're not starting that traffic again before 6:37. Understanding that some people are more of early birds, so they like to get at work, be that early. Some others function better in the evenings, which I totally get. But we need to stop that traffic around the clock and even on weekends. I mean, people need to be able to take time off, disconnect. In today's world, it's easy enough to get emails and get phone calls. I mean, you're only a phone call away, a text away, right? So wake up in the morning. First thing I was doing back then was just picking up my phone and start answering emails before I even get out of bed. So I don't think that's sustainable over time. So especially if you have a family at home, you have young kids, you have other stuff to do, and you need to be able to not only accomplish yourself as a professional, but also in a family and personal manner. So yeah, we did cut traffic. Obviously, we had to communicate before the intent. So it's not that we don't want you to be an overachiever,
Yeah,
but we need you. We need to help you think about yourself and your personal work balance.
Well, from there, I guess I'd like to talk about women in leadership roles in manufacturing. I think there has always been sort of a feeling in the industry that we need to make more opportunities for women in leadership roles, but there is that work-life balance question. That question has only gotten more involved and more complicated in recent years. I wonder if we can talk about that, and if you don't mind, maybe we can even do it from your own experience.
Definitely. So as a mom myself and a grandma of a 5-year-old, I had to balance out that personal family life with my career aspirations. I've been asked to relocate quite a few times over the last 10 years. And that is something that's, even nowadays, for me, is difficult to bring up. How do you go back to your family, to your husband that has a job that he loves, as friends all over? We were both born in the area where we live in now. Asking your kids who are 8 and 12 to say, hey, so mom got that very cool opportunity, but that means we're going to need to move across the country for a few years. As you can probably tell, I'm a French speaking, so moving everybody to an English school as well, English environment. So aren't you happy? We're going to do this with mom. Didn't go as planned. So loads of talks, a lot of negotiations around that, easing every family members into the move. But I think it is important to recognize that not only men can have this opportunity of relocating and getting to their aspired career path, women can also do that. It's just a little bit more unusual, but I'm sure coming into the year we're in, then the next decades to come, it's going to be more and more available for women to move around, move the ladder up to executive and top management positions, which often means you need to relocate. So that was my own experience. We've had that chat a few times. We did relocate twice with my family. Last time that I did relocate, I actually relocated by my own, but that was okay because that was like a whole family thing where we talked through, measured the pros and the cons for every family members, and the decision was made that, I wanted to follow through, but the other family members were just not willing to do it because that involved moving in another country. So we made up a plan, and I moved down there for about 18 months. I was traveling back and forth, but it was fine for me to do that extra effort because I was wanting to do that job. I wanted to give it a shot. And then it all worked out well in the end. Got the promotion I was looking for. Been very happy at the job, and finally decided to move back 18 months later. But having those conversations is definitely key. Same as you do at the plant level, talking with people, understanding their own situation, their own take on it, and trying to find the right sweet spot that's going to balance out everybody's needs.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier. When an organization does look at each employee as an individual who has their own circumstances, there are people who are willing to relocate to build the career that they want. There are people who aren't, but how do you still give them opportunities where they are? It's a balancing act, and it is a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation you have to have with your top talent and your future leaders.
Definitely.
So I guess maybe from your own example, we can pivot into a broader conversation, because I think a lot of people who have been listening to this episode, they probably saw the title of it and they said, oh yeah, this is relevant to me and my team. What advice might you have for people who want to make sure that they are making these opportunities available to their future leaders?
Just be on the lookout. Be good listeners. So when I say be on the lookout is not everybody is going to be willing to do it. So you have to definitely get to know the people you work with, and identify those overachievers that are willing to go that extra step to get there. And then when I say be good listeners, is listen. Is there any hurdles that they're going to face doing that? How can you help manage those? Just going back to my own experience, moving families around and stuff. Do they have kids? Is there good schools nearby? And talking about relocation, but even talking about taking like upper management positions. So what are those expectations? Is your expectation that this person is going to be available 24/7? If that's the case, and I'm not saying it's not okay or it's okay, if this is your expectation, be transparent about it. Nobody's going to benefit from not being transparent and not knowing what they're getting themselves into.
Well, and I think there's really something to the idea that manufacturing as a sector is always going to have a few things that have to happen. As you say, like, there are people who are going to have to be on a shop floor. So,
Yep.
You have to communicate that expectation. And the people who opt in and understand it and lean in, well, that is your available talent pool. And from there, you're going to look for attitude. And I've had other people tell me, you can hire for attitude and you can train them to do whatever you need to do if they had the attitude you wanted in the beginning. And I think that speaks to the idea of work-life balance. How are we talking to, they're going to be great at work and they have a life outside of work that we can work with, we can accommodate with by listening and communicating.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have covered a lot of ground in this conversation. If there were 2 or 3 takeaways you would want to highlight for people, have them think about a little further, what would you want to pick out?
I would say, 1, get to know your people, right? So know what their expectations are, what they're shooting for. Are they shooting for their stars? Are they happy where they are? And that's all okay. So get to know who you work with. Second one, I would say, you don't have to know all the detailed personal information about your succession planning, but you need to know enough so that you can help alleviate or facilitate any of the personal stuff that can come in conflict with the work-life balance we talked earlier. And then be true.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Cynthia, I feel like I could talk about this subject with you all day. I really appreciate the time that you've given us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You've been listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. I've been Jeff Nix. Let's do it again soon.